I'm Jeff Mays of the New York Times, sitting in for Sam Roberts. Welcome to the New York Times Close Up. This week, we're celebrating Metropolitan Diary, which has been capturing everyday New York moments for half a century. But first, a 6-year-old girl died over the holiday weekend after being swept away by a powerful current off Long Island, raising new concerns about beach safety for New Yorkers. Christina Carone is a New York Times mental health reporter who has been covering beach safety, heat, isolation, new social clubs, the Venezuelan grief after the earthquakes, and Knicks fandom. And she's looking at what all this reveals about how New Yorkers stay safe and connected. Thanks for joining us, Christina.
Thank you for having me.
So I just want to start off with beach safety because it's warm, people are out at the water. I'm wondering what you learned a little bit about reporting on this Long Island drowning in terms of rules to keep yourself safe at the beach.
If you are a really strong swimmer and you're the person who's caught in the current, you want to swim perpendicular to the current, never in the current or against the current. Even people who are really strong swimmers in a pool are not going to be able to swim easily in a current. They're going to get exhausted within literally seconds.
And then panic, right?
And panic, yeah. And once people start panicking, it ends very badly. So if you can swim, if you're a strong swimmer, you can try to swim perpendicular to at least get yourself out of the moving water, right, so that you can make your way back to the shore. But what's really interesting is, I was looking at a Red Cross survey, and it said that 85% of Americans claim they can swim. Right. But then when the Red Cross asked, do you know these 5 safety skills that can keep you safe in the water? It was less than half actually that said, yes, I can do all 5 of these things. And these things were, for example, being able to swim 25 yards, which is the average length of a pool, being able to pull yourself out of the pool without the assistance of a ladder, being able to float. A lot of people say they can swim, but they actually can't float, which is a huge part of staying safe in the water. So what that tells us is that it's possible a lot of people are overestimating their abilities in the water. And again, swimming in the ocean is a completely different beast than being in the pool.
Yeah, I'm wondering if you feel like this is different for children. I mean, this was a young girl that drowned. Are there ways parents can help children be safe around water?
Yeah, and I think with kids, again, to really emphasize the ability to float is so important. Now, I don't know much about the little girl's ability in this case, if she even knew how to swim at all. But simply being able to float in the water can be a life-saving technique. In the case of this child, she had gotten caught in the tidal current that had brought her all the way to Great Peconic Bay. She was in a creek, and the creek fed into the bay feeds into the ocean. And a kayaker actually happened to be nearby. But tragedy in the water can happen within seconds, and the kayaker just was not able to reach her in time. He did eventually get to her. And there was also a 16-year-old cousin, the police told me, who was on the shore who wanted to go after her, right, but the current was too strong. Yeah. The cousin actually made the right decision in that circumstance, right, because a lot of people die trying to save people who are drowning.
Let's move on and talk a little bit about some of your other reporting. You recently wrote about the earthquake in Venezuela. I'm wondering, when you spoke to Venezuelans in New York, were they concerned about how the years of political and economic crisis in the country had facilitated this tragedy, or made this tragedy even worse?
Yes, absolutely. I think that was something that nearly every person brought up when we were interviewing them. The instability in the country has made it difficult to have adequate food. It's affected the ability to get health care. And then when you add a horrific series of earthquakes, it makes an already stressed population even more stressed, of course. And not having the ability to get emergency workers in quickly, for example. So we did see some miraculous recoveries out of the rubble in the subsequent days. I remember there was a 3-year-old who was pulled out days later. It was really remarkable, but unfortunately, the death toll, I think, is so much higher than anyone had initially estimated.
Right. And what are New Yorkers, Venezuelans here in New York, how are they responding to this? Are they gathering resources? Are they returning home to try to help? What's happening?
Yeah, after the initial, I think, shock and grief that people were experiencing, they immediately jumped into action, and people were setting up sites where you could donate food and water. They were setting up GoFundMes and different types. And actually, the conductor who's going to be leading the New York Philharmonic in the fall season, who is Venezuelan, this was actually not in the story, but we learned about it later, that he's worked with an organization to set up a fund that is aiming to raise I believe it was $12 million. So far, I think they have a little over 100,000. But there's multiple efforts to raise money and to gather supplies and work with nonprofits that can deliver those supplies to people in need. I also actually ran into a couple of people who were compiling a spreadsheet that they were posting and distributing within their community that had every single donation site, and they were even going beyond New York City to cover places where people may live out of state who really want to help, and then distributing that so that people could easily find a place to go without having to do much legwork.
I mean, you cover mental health, and you must have, the people you talk to must have been experiencing signs of grief, trauma. Even people who are here have family members there. Any tips for people how to deal with like a tragic situation like this and handling that?
Yeah, it's so difficult. It's easy to say to speak with a therapist if you have the means to do so. But if you don't already have a therapist, it can be kind of hard to find one. And sometimes there are also economic barriers to getting that sort of help. But there are also free community resources that I would suggest people look into, because you can find low-cost therapy. You can also call helplines if there's a need to immediately speak to someone. 988 is the one that's probably most familiar to people. But there are also helplines that you can reach through 988 that are called warm lines. They're for people who aren't in crisis themselves, but they simply need to talk to someone. And that, if you are in a pinch, is a really great resource.
Yeah, that's great. So moving on, talking a little bit more about mental health, you've written a little bit about social isolation and some of the rise of social clubs, of people trying to combat that. Like, is that a widespread thing that's happening in the city?
Yeah, so this has been an interesting trend that has started over the last few years, where it seems to have been born out of some of the worst years of the pandemic. And what I've noticed is these aren't just ordinary meetups. You can find those just about anywhere in any city. These are meetups that are generally low cost. They give people a really structured framework to interact with each other. So you're not just wandering into a bar trying to strike up a conversation and not knowing if you're bothering someone or how to go about it or what they're even interested in. These are groups that are coming together through a shared interest usually. The one that I visited was called Critical Thinking Club. It started earlier this year, and their mission is to have a fun intellectual discussion about a topic that is of interest to a lot of people. And the magic of it is that they break into small groups. So it's not just you come and you listen to a couple of people debate and then go home. You come, you listen to people debate about the subject, and then you break into small groups. You're given conversation prompts, and you're able to actually discuss that with your small group. And through that process, I actually saw 2 women connect who were total strangers. It happened right before my eyes, where they just had this, you could see that they had this bond.
Right.
And I don't know that they specifically came for that purpose to find a new friend. It just sort of organically happened. And that's, there's another club, Puzzle People of NYC, which is really fun. It's totally free. You can show up, bring a jigsaw puzzle, or use one of theirs and build puzzles with people. And so already you sort of have a common interest in puzzles. But then you have something direct to talk about. What's the puzzle you're making? Or, how am I going to, I need help with this piece. Could you, and conversations just naturally happen. So I loved the idea that people were finding ways to get off their phones and out of the digital world and actually talk to other people in a way that feels less intimidating than some of the other settings that they might have found themselves in the past.
Right. New York is a tough place to live. I don't know. You cover mental health here. I mean, how do you feel about the overall state of people's mental health living here in New York City? Are the resources available? Are we discussing these issues that sometimes are hard to talk about?
Yeah, I mean, I guess it really depends on the person, right? I mean, some people are doing just fine here and they have their little niche and their little social group. Other people, I think particularly those who are newer to the city, but also some people who've been here for a while, have struggled to find their niche. They've told me that they easily find connections, but keeping those connections is what's hard. And having connections that are on a deeper level is really difficult. One woman I interviewed had told me that nobody would ever guess she's lonely. She has a lot of friends, but I think she kind of puts friends in quote marks in a lot of cases because she doesn't feel as though they are close friends. They're more of people that she has fun with, she'll go out with sometimes, but they're not people who are sort of there for her no matter what, that sort of really intimate bond that she was hoping to cultivate here. And she's actually considering moving. She was thinking about leaving the city at this point because it has continued to be such a lonely place for her. And I think it's so dependent sometimes on chance. Some people happen to be looking for a relationship at the same time, whether it's platonic or romantic, and they just happen to be in the same circumstances and something develops. And I think the main thing people have to do is put themselves out there as much as possible, but to do it in a really smart way. To be putting yourself in situations where you are surrounded by people who are doing an activity that you also really enjoy. One person gave me the advice that community means a place where people notice if you're not there. So trying to find those spaces where your presence matters is much more important than just randomly trying to choose events that you see popping up in the city.
Wow. I think that's a great place to leave it. That's some great advice. Thank you, Christina, for your coverage and joining us today.
Thank you.
Coming up, New York Times Metro reporter Ed Shanahan on how to turn a real New York moment into a 300-word Metropolitan Diary masterpiece. For 50 years, the New York Times' Metropolitan Diary has captured everyday moments of New York City life as short, memorable stories that capture the essence of everyday life in the city. Joining us now is Ed Shanahan, the New York Times Metro reporter who edits Metropolitan Diary. He recently led a special 50th anniversary challenge showing New Yorkers how to turn a real city memory into a tight 300-word story. Welcome, Ed.
Jeff, good to be here.
So if you had to in one sentence, how would you describe the mission of Metropolitan Diary?
Metropolitan Diary is, it's about the readers. It's about their experiences in the city. This is going to be long. This is going to be a long sentence. Sorry about that. But anyway, the idea is to capture, again, sort of the essence, I think, as you said in your intro, but the heart, the spirit, the sort of unique New Yorkness of the city in kind of a, I would say, the city is at its sort of its wholesome best, kind of in a way.
Right. So 1976 is when it started.
That's correct.
And was that the sort of always been the intention of?
I am not totally sure that with that specificity that was the intention, but the idea of the original, of the editor who originated the column, Arthur Gelb, was something that connected the newspaper more closely to its readers in New York by asking them to contribute their experiences and their stories of New York.
And so this has been going on for 50 years. Obviously, there's a lot of interest in it. Like, do you get thousands of entries per week? How does it work?
No, not thousands. We do generally get probably about 100 submissions a week. They come in by email. We have a special submission tool that we attach to the column. We also still get a decent number by the U.S. Postal Service. Yeah, so about 100 a week. I will say that with the challenge we just did, as you said, where we tried to encourage people, A, to submit, and B, tried to give them tips on how to write what we consider to be something worthy of consideration, I would say in the week that challenge was live and on the website, we probably got about 800 submissions, so a tremendous surge in the quantity. I haven't had a chance yet to go through all of them to figure out if we got a lot more usable ones, but we'll see soon enough.
So the diary's been going on for 50 years. I'm wondering, is there any era that you think was like the golden age?
Well, of course, the one that I am now now in charge of. I will say that I've always been a reader of the Metropolitan Diary, but I am more intimately familiar with the last 10 years that I've been doing with it. So while I'm not going to stand here and say that this is the best era of the diary, I'm not knowledgeable enough to really compare earlier eras. I think that it's been consistently good enough to maintain its position in the paper, longest running column in the New York Times.
Wow. It's good to give yourself some kudos. That's okay. How do you pick, even if it's 100 submissions, how do you whittle that down?
Well, we have certain things that we don't publish. There are certain topics that we won't delve into. Politics, for instance, we try to keep politics out of Metropolitan Diary because it can be pretty contentious, and we're looking for material that is sort of relatable and cuts across human experiences. But beyond the things that we don't want to include, we're looking for humor, we're looking for kindness, we're looking for something inspirational, we're looking for something sometimes kind of randomly New York, and then sometimes we're looking for a little bit of, I suppose you'd call it vinegar, a little something like a snappy comeback from a waiter at a restaurant or something like that to still have a little bit of that New York edge.
I like the quirky ones, the ones where like something sort of unexpected, starts out mundane,
yes,
and then something unexpected happens.
Yeah, those are often my favorites too.
Yeah.
And a lot of times it involves people encountering strangers and things that happen between strangers. And New York is a great place for those kind of encounters because we're all out on the streets, we're in the subway, we're on the buses, New York's the kind of place where people are sort of in close proximity to each other, and therefore they have, there's a lot of occasions for these kinds of encounters.
Now, you've been editor for 10 years, and we're encouraging readers to submit their own stories now. Have you ever had a story in the diary?
Not in the diary per se, but a couple of years ago, I did write about a personal experience of mine as part of one of our best of the year packages. And if you're asking me to describe it quickly.
Quick summary, yeah, tell me.
Well, it involved me going for a jog in Fort Tryon Park and encountering a couple of people and deciding that I had to give a woman the Heimlich maneuver. I did.
Was that the correct decision?
It turns out it was the correct decision because the kicker of the story was that a year later I was running again in Fort Tryon Park, and I encountered the same couple, and they had with them a baby. And it turned out that she had been pregnant when I gave her the Heimlich maneuver, and I suppose some might say that I had saved 2 lives that day.
Wow.
And that was a random thing that happened. that because of the setting, really only would have happened in New York.
That is a perfect Metro Diary
Well, it's
story.
yeah. I mean, yeah. I don't know. They're not, and we don't necessarily run. We run a lot of stuff,
Right.
so everything's different, and nothing is really quite the same as that.
I'm wondering how you think the diary's changed over 50 years. Certainly in 1976, there was no social media, and that appears to be a place now where people go to get these sort of quirky, bite-sized stories.
Yes, yeah.
How has the diary endured in this era?
Well, I think there are certain sort of like universal impulses or feelings or qualities or emotions that people have that, they're timeless and they transcend the medium in which we present the column. I will say that when the column began, the editor had a much more sort of, was much more present. The editor's voice was much more present.
Right.
In addition to the contributors, the editor would write little bits to sort of stitch the column together.
Right.
That ended sometime in the 1990s, where now it's just the readers' voices. So it has changed in that way.
Right. And readers seem to, has that made a difference in how the column is received?
I think, I feel like, and again, I don't know if it's bias or it's personal experience or whatever, the last 10 years is really what I have knowledge about, but the column has, I feel like, gained new popularity and fresh life in the last 10 years, in part because of everything that's going on in the world around us that is, like the news never stops, and things seem often chaotic and contentious and difficult, and Metropolitan Diary is a place where it's kind of quiet, you pause, there's a couple of laughs, it's thoughtful, this kind of thing. And in that way, I think, simply by being what it is, in sort of contrast to the rest of the world, it has attracted actually sort of a new audience and revived its popularity.
So we talked about your great story in the diary, but I'm wondering, like, have there been standouts in your 10 years? Do you have a favorite or?
Well, so I've probably published we have published in the time that I've been the editor probably about 2,500 or 3,000. So it is very hard to pick out one or two. But in thinking about this, I was recalling one that that was submitted, that we published, about a woman who had a funeral service for her mother on the Staten Island Ferry, and brought the ashes along from cremation and threw them overboard. And one of the things that made it memorable was that they did various things. They lit a candle. There was some, I think there was a bottle of champagne that was poured, and these were things that were done in violation of the rules of the Staten Island Ferry.
Right.
And some of the staff members came over and said, "Hey, you're not really supposed to be doing that," but nobody stopped them from doing it, and they proceeded. And there was a sounding of the horn when they did throw the ashes overboard. So that to me was very New York. And the Staten Island Ferry, I mean, come on.
Yeah.
Iconic.
You can't get more New York than the Ferry.
Exactly.
So the column also has a visual presence.
That's
as well.
right.
Agnes Lee, she's done over 2,000 black and white drawings.
I mean,
at
she's
this
been
point,
doing
right?
it since 2017, 2018, somewhere in that range. And her style and her illustrations, I think, really help define the column's vibe, shall I say, for lack of a better term. They're simple, but she zeroes in on key details of the stories in a way that I know resonate with readers. We get a lot of email about how much they love her drawings, and I know that in the comments section of the column, people talk about, that they go back and sort of look and look at the illustrations again after they have finished reading. They sort of pore over the illustrations.
Do you have a favorite Agnes Lee?
She did a nice caricature of me once. That's pretty good.
That's good. They
Yeah.
should put it on your Metropolitan.
Yeah, and we actually, as part of the challenge that we did in terms of encouraging readers, she animated a couple of illustrations to give them some motion, and those are really nice. Those are, you know, they're simple, single frame, but with movement within the frame. And I always like when she does that.
So now you're encouraging readers to write their own.
Yes.
What have you learned so far, or is there? What are you getting? What are you seeing? What are New Yorkers writing about?
Well, in terms of what we gotten from the challenge, I mean, as I said, we got a tremendous surge in the number of submissions, and I haven't gone through all of them. I have gone through some of them.
What are they writing about?
Well, they're writing about a lot of the things that we often see in terms of again, encounters with strangers, or odd coincidences, or snippets of overheard conversation, or special places that they recall, nostalgic, you know, nostalgia for events and for family, that kind of thing. It's really, I don't know that I've seen anything, I don't want to rule it out, but I don't know that I've seen anything that's totally out of left field that we've never seen before, but I am seeing some nice stuff.
What do you think the overall contribution, does this column help bring New Yorkers together? Does it help them understand each other more? And then secondly, another 50 years, do you expect the diary to still be around in 50 years?
Well, if it does, so last question first. If it does go on for another 50 years, someone else is going to have to do it, because I'm not going to be here that much longer, here at the New York Times. Does it bring people together? I do know, again, just to go back to the comments section for a minute, it's very robust, and it's very, and it's not just New Yorkers, honestly. It's a very popular column with people around the country and even around the world. We have devoted readers in India and Australia that I know about, England as well, and other places. And if the comments section is a reflection of the larger readership, I think it does bring people together. And I know that when I encounter people and they learn that I am the editor of the Metropolitan Diary, they often have a story to tell, or they think, oh, that's great, I read it all the time, or whatever. So, you know, I think it does have its place in that way. And it's not for everybody, but nothing really is.
Ed, thanks so much for editing the diary.
Sure, and well, thank you for having me on to talk about it.
That's it for our show. For the New York Times and CUNY TV, I'm Jeff Mays. If you've enjoyed these conversations and want to support more programs like this, please consider donating at the link on your screen. Thanks for watching.